Welcome to the EATYALL podcast, where we discuss the struggles and successes of the farmers, food producers, and chefs who are working to get better ingredients into restaurants today and to ensure their availability in the future.
This week on the EATYALL podcast, our guest Lew Childre, who's a man of many talents, varied expertise, and a Bama boy from way back, joins us. And he's going to be live on the back porch with me, and we're going to hear about his business in the oyster world, and he's got some pretty audacious plans. I love interviewing great guests, and y'all, Lew is he's one in a million. He's almost like the Dos Equis man. He's one of the most interesting people I've ever met. I think you're going to love this podcast. Stay tuned. Here we go with Lew. Welcome to the EATYALL podcast. I'm your host, Andy Chapman, recording live in person, which is my favorite way to do it, with my friend Lew Childre, who is, where are you from, Lew?
So originally I was born in Fairhope, but of course I lived in the very north side of Bon Secour. So Bon Secour people would call me from Foley, and Foley people would call me from Bon Secour. So I was right in between, because the true river rats don't quite consider me, close enough to them.
So you're from L.A.?
Yes, definitely. I'm like 6 miles from the beach.
And for our Los Angeles area listeners, that's going to be lower Alabama. That's not y'all. Lew, we're actually in Ocean Springs. Lew's probably, what was it, 45-minute drive to get here?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just punched on a podcast and drove over here.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
A little Rogan on the way here while we're being controversial. It's a good time,
There you go. Hey, if you can't beat them, join them. So tell me about, you have a company that does oysters. Talk to me about that. What's the name of your company, and kind of tell me your story there.
So the company, it's of course, it's a crazy world we live in. So the company is Double D Oysters, and that is kind of a branch off of a company called Anchor Subsea. That's actually partners Doug and Mary. That's their company that he had when he was in the oil and gas business, and he just kept it when he got out. So Anchor Subsea, of course, is that parent company, and then Double D is the oyster company, and it was really based around seed and equipment for oyster farmers. About 2.5 years ago, you could just see that the seed business was getting really competitive, and the gear business was kind of crazy because people weren't scaling up locally. So Doug knew he needed a farm. And at that point, I had my own farm. This is about 3 years ago, 3.5. I had my own farm over in Baldwin County that I was getting out of. So it was kind of a thing that my best friend and I started. We couldn't do it due to a bunch of different things. Mainly water quality was killing us. Just a bunch of nitrates in the ground. We had one of those good old sewage spills. They're kind of close by us that, of course, nobody wanted to admit that really it happened, but it happened. And it was difficult, but, I learned a ton because it was hands-on. We were doing it. I was literally still working 5-6 days a week as an engineer and doing that every weekend, rain or shine, sleet, snow. I've seen it all. Like, 6-footers crossing the bay, got it. Pretty days. Oh yeah, they were wonderful. They were few and far between, but it was a good time.
Yeah.
From there, kind of Doug and I, it was kind of a growing thing. We just kind of grew as a team. I had a lot of the hands-on experience. Doug had the seed and equipment side. We got to see a lot of what not to do locally.
Right.
Over that, 3 to 5 years of everybody else growing. We'd also seen what other people do around the world. And that's a big game changer for us, was bringing in some of that outside experience. That was really the thing that kind of got us where we are today, and just putting it all together. He's a project managing engineer. I've got 15 years in reliability engineering, so I'm the glorified mechanic that really is still a mechanic. So I fix all the uh-ohs.
Yeah.
So
somebody's got to do that.
Yeah. I don't cuss everybody all the time, but it's a good, think about it sometimes, not to their face.
Yeah. So that led you to, now you've got how many, what does the oyster business look like for you? Like you've got.
So it's, of course, it's ever evolving. It's happened quickly and changed fast, like everything nowadays. So we kind of decided that Dauphin Island was a place we wanted to grow oysters. It has good growing waters. It's unique. It's pretty. it's a lot of people don't know that Dauphin Island's there, across the world, but locally everyone knows it's there, and it's beautiful. The water's pristine, pretty.
And so for our listeners, it's an island completely, what is it, saltwater all around it, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of a really unique, so it sits about 10, 12 miles south of the southmost part of Mobile County. And it's surrounded completely on the north side by Mississippi Sound. And even though it's not in Mississippi, it's called Mississippi Sound, but it connects to, the Biloxi Marsh. It connects to Pascagoula Rivers. So there's a lot of beautiful tributaries that come off of that. And it connects to the islands off of here in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Petty Boy's, 6 miles away from it, the western tip. And so there's a great influx of good, clean, estuarial brackish water that exchanges, but we got the Gulf right on the other side. So it brings us those great currents, lots of oxygen, all the good things you need. The issue that happened to us was we couldn't get a permit. So most people don't know this, but it takes months to get a permit. So if you wanted to put one right there, like I said, you wanted to put one in your backyard, right? Right now with COVID, in 2 years. So you could get started today, and 2 years later.
Wow.
Nice. That was where's the chimes? When
I know.
But about 2 years, you'd be ready to put one,
So, and then the permit is for a set number of acres, or how does that work?
So that's actually a water column lease. It's kind of unique. For years, it was a bottom lease. And that was one of the first hurdles we had to kind of get through with the state of Alabama. And anywhere across the Gulf Coast was traditionally oysters were grown on the bottom.
Right.
So there was no need to lease the water. You just need to lease the bottom.
So it didn't include that, huh?
Right. So now this water column lease allows you to from the top to the bottom. It's a lot cheaper than if you were to do like a marina or something like that, because you still have full access. So we still have people drive their boats to the middle of our farm, which sometimes is questionable. You kind of have to have talks with people like, hey, that's expensive. And,
right.
We find cut lines every once in a while. But for the most part, I mean, it's great for the ecology. Like, there's people fish around them all the time. So they seem to enjoy it. We don't run them off because they're your potential customers. So
right. Do you have signage out there on the water? These are double Ds?
We don't. We have signs that are like, hey, this is underwater stuff. But we've kind of taken the perspective of fly low, until everybody kind of course, gets a little more convinced this is a good thing. There's a lot of traditional people on Dauphin Island that are like, I don't want to see that in my sunset. It's like, well, would you like to have pretty clean water?
Yeah, 50 gallons a day times how many oysters you got out there?
Yeah, several.
Yeah.
So you're talking, you're probably, somewhere between 30 and 100 million gallons a day. That's a lot of water.
And so on the just ecology side of things, I've read and heard things like the fishing around these oyster farms is insane.
Well, we are on a podcast. I do like to fish around my farm, but yeah, pretty good. Yeah. I'll give up my secret spot.
What does that do for fishing?
So, like if you open up a bag, let's say we would go out there, and not so much this time of year, but if we were to open up in, let's say, May, it'll be full of baby seed shrimp. And then immediately following the shrimp, there'll be a bajillion baby blue crabs. And when I mean baby, I'm talking about like,
millimeters.
Right, like a millimeter. You're like, what? Like you dump them out and they just crawl forever. So, a lot of times.
Look like ants scattering.
Oh, yeah. And then as soon as before the blue crabs show up, it's the baby stone crabs. So every crop of anything that has, larval in the water, it finds that bag of oysters as a home. And then those animals, they kind of start growing, and they grow up in the bag. So, I've seen blue crabs start off at 2 inches, and if you don't get him out of the bag, next time you come around a couple months from now, he's 4 inches because he's eating prime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's the fatted calf. So, you better watch out because he's going to eat your oysters too.
Huh. So crabs eat oysters?
Definitely. The stone crabs will clip the ends of them off.
Uh-huh.
Blue crabs, from what I've been told, they'll kind of sit on top of one and like poke their little eggs in there and kind of scramble the eggs inside and then eat them out. But you'll open them up, and if you leave them in there long enough, you'll have a really big crab, and you won't have any oysters. So a bunch of shells is about all you get.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you guys sell oysters to a lot of different places down on the Alabama Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
We're likely moving some other directions with that in the near future, and we'll see how all that pans out. We'll update the podcast listeners on where. But talk to me about what prepared you to be a farmer. I mean, you've got lots of lives at stake every day, and there's living animals. Your livestock are in the water.
So, I mean, it's the big thing about the farm is, oysters grow. It's not that they're that hard to grow. Of course, they're much easier to kill than they are to grow, but it's the handling side. It's the material handling side. I mean, I've got almost 15 years of industrial engineering experience that's been about, mass movement, material supply, supply chain, making sure that there's no piece of the puzzle that runs dry.
Right.
That's the hard part. Right now oysters are growing slow. There's not a lot of oysters on the market. There seems to be a lot of need. But how do I make sure that I don't sell everything I got, and 2 weeks later, my customers that rely on me are going, "Hey, man, what you got?" So, it's great to have a bunch of people knock on your door, but it's really better to treat the customers you got.
Yeah.
And understand, that you got to take care of them first.
Right. Right. So when you were growing up, did you work on the water?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So I grew up on Montefiore River, and some of my best friends grew up on the river, and I used to hang out with them. And Montefiore used to kind of be like the mini Bayou Battery. So growing up there, nobody dreamed of living. No rich person dreamed of living on Montefiore River. It was just a mud hole with a bunch of rednecks. And now that's all changed. Everybody in the now, houses that I remember as a kid that were rat dumps are getting ripped down, and they're building, $1 million mansions, which is crazy because it's only 12 miles, 6-8 miles from the beach, but it's close enough, and it's on the water. So, but growing up then, it was a lot of shrimp boats. Really, the big decline in the shrimping industry there, the mid 90s. Growing up there I remember when there was 30, 40 boats in Montefiore fisheries. Now there's, I think, none.
Really?
They used to have 2, then they're down to none now. So
wow.
At one point in the heyday in the late 70s, early 80s, there was 140 boats, 150 boats running out of there.
Wow.
So it's been a big change. We've seen a drastic shift in the economical, I guess, makeup of that area, but too, just the people. It was really blue collar,
right?
And now it's kind of more of a retiree kind of feel. But back when I grew up, there was a lot of people that my neighbor, commercial shrimp on the side. He was a crew boat captain for 30 years that had his own shrimp boat. He'd come home off the other boat and go shrimping for, weeks.
Wow.
And my uncles were soybean and corn farmers and peanut farmers. So, I used to kind of help them out for years. And my dad's cousin, Neil, still does it. He still farms about 1,000 acres. So kind of just being around it and enjoying those people and learning. And I've always had, better lack of word, pieces of crap for vehicles, and I had to figure out a way to go where I wanted to go. So I learned how to work on them, and that kind of helps attribute to all this. But the getting back to the farming aspect, why I kind of got into it was, being in industry. I worked at some places that were, I wouldn't say that they were awful polluters, but they were polluters. I mean, they were industry. I worked for one of the largest polluter in the state of Florida right out of college, and I was over their deep well injection system. So, sorry guys, if y'all know who I am. I'm not trying to cut you down.
Deep oil injection, huh?
Yeah. So we actually had a couple of wells that were 2 miles deep.
That sounds like a deep story.
So, it was wild. So after doing that for about 5 or 6 years and kind of helped kill the world, I kind of realized that maybe I want to do something different.
Right.
Had my little shrimp boat, enjoyed it, couldn't ever do it while working. So I was like, I'll grow oysters. This will be easy. Yeah. It's a lot easier to leave the shrimp boat part than have something in the water that was growing every day. So
So oysters, you put them. So you talked about seed, and of course, a lot of folks think about like a corn seed or a soybean seed or a cotton, wheat grain, whatever. What is an oyster seed? What does that even look like?
So oyster seed is kind of a crazy thing. It's actually just an oyster. It's not like a seed. Of course, you plant a corn kernel and it makes a corn plant.
Right.
Oyster seed is just a small oyster. So they consider, in Alabama, they follow the regs of the federal government. Oyster seed is anything up to 1 inch.
Okay.
So they consider it unedible. Any oyster unedible is seed. So 1 inch or less. So it changes some of the dynamics.
So it looks like an oyster.
Yeah.
It's just miniature.
Looks like an oyster, eats like an oyster. It's an oyster, but they consider it unedible. So some of the dynamics of what you can do with that, of course, like moving across state lines or where you can grow it.
Right.
There's areas you can grow seed, you can't grow oysters. All those kind of attribute to water quality, but it all comes back to that sizing. So
when you grow seed, so in the beef world, right? There's Angus, there's Brahma, there's there's 50 different Wagyu. There's all sorts of different characteristics, traits, things that are better for different climates. There's the piney woods my buddy Jody grows, which are a Spanish breed. They're a little smaller. They grow better in this hot weather and limited forage versus, the Midwestern folks. Is that something y'all deal with in the oyster world, or are they all like,
So the species, anything from Mexico all the way up into Canada, is all the Virginicus. So it's all the same species. Now, that being said, there's kind of a subspecies of each area. So, for instance, we buy seed and other larvae from all over. And we have for years, and we've tried stuff from all over. And for instance, if you buy stuff from South Florida, it's typically our higher salinity product. It's used to grow, and its broodstock is conditioned in higher salinity. For some reason, it grows really good down there. But it also likes to die up here. And it also grows a thinner shell. It's just a thing. Huh. It kind of grows a long, thin shape.
Okay.
So it's more along the lines of you just kind of see like a pencil oyster, so real long and skinny, compared to our oysters, which are kind of more broad-billed, flat. But West Coast has several different types. They have Komodos and Olympias and Pacifics, and they've even taken Virginicas over there and they grow. Europe, they have they have 2 or 3 different breeds of oysters because people have brought them there.
Right.
And they've been very prolific. But here we only grow one type. But here it's more about where you grow and how that relates to the taste. So of course you have salinity.
Right.
So that's the brininess of it. It's important. Not many people really enjoy a freshwater loogie, but most people really enjoy a good salty oyster. That's a good one.
Right.
Now, of course, where it's grown, and this is kind of going back to your foodie types, miroir versus terroir of wines. They kind of take on the taste of what they're eating. That's kind of another thing. The other thing we notice is certain waters where the oyster is really healthy and used to growing in. Mm-hmm. Let's say its average salinity is 20. That oyster will taste really good at 20. I could take another oyster that's used to growing in 28, and if its waters go to 20, it won't taste nearly as good.
Really?
As the oyster that's been in 20 and happy at 20. It's just something about, I think it has to do something to the fat content of the oyster, where it likes to be growing, what it likes to eat, the type of algae it's eating. And all that attributes to what water it's in at what time.
Yeah, so they're when they're cleaning the water, that's basically they're eating algae and
sure. And, another thing we see a lot is, and when we mean clean the water, it's a really good. A lot of people have this misunderstanding that water is inherently dirty. So there's stuff in water. It isn't really dirty. It's more along, there's several things. There's the phytoplanktons that's what they're eating. There's turbidity, which is entrained solids. So you can have really muddy water, turbid water.
Right.
Those oysters will filter that And in their gill, they'll actually move the mud to one end of their body and excrete it. And then they'll move the food to their gut and eat it. So when you mean cleaning it, a lot of it times it's better to say like almost like purifying it, right? You're
Right.
they're not cleaning it from heavy metals and all this bad stuff.
Right.
It's really more along the lines of getting the water clarity up, which helps everything. Because all of a sudden now sunlight hits the bottom. You've got, seagrasses that can grow. From an ecology standpoint, oysters are awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really cool. Clams are really cool too.
Yeah.
I'd love to one day do that, but I've got to focus on what we're doing now.
Yeah.
We're good at it. But any kind of bivalve shellfish really does a great job at cleaning the water.
Wow. That's fascinating, Lou. You can learn a lot from a boy from South Alabama.
Easy there. Easy.
I mean, if you know what to ask him.
Yeah.
Double D Oyster Farm, right?
Yep.
And
So
Lou-
it's actually the company name, and then we have 2 brands off of that.
oh, okay.
So we got. Remember, I think we kind of left off with how hard it was to get a permit. So
yeah.
we had been planning on going to Dauphin Island. Started the permit process. Knew it was going to take forever. So we ended up starting the first farm almost to Mississippi line, but it's still in Alabama waters. It's in off a point. It's called Point of Pins. It's just west of Battle Battery. So it's in that there's actually a national forest estuary preserve that comes off of in between Alabama and Mississippi. We're actually all part of that estuarial water.
Oh, nice.
So there's actually like a shellfish park, I guess you'd say, that was started by Alma Bryant High School, kind of as a training program.
Uh-huh.
We have their most southern, most western lease. So we actually sublease for them. Started the farms there. That's where Grand Batur, that's our farm that is up there. So we sell under that name. We did that for almost a year before we got the permit to grow on Dauphin Island. Those oysters are called Island Times.
I got you.
It's kind of a lot of the brands, when it comes to branding, it's kind of weird because everybody, of course, wanted these real long, fancy, Frenchy names in the beginning. So, because there's oysters up in Canada, moisson boulet, and all these very
Spell that.
okay, yeah, exactly right. So, and then there was other ones that came out, and then they all tried to sound the same. So there was there's one, and then everybody tried to sound like him. And it was kind of like, so, and I had friends that were on the beach, and I was like, I wanted a blue collar oyster. I wanted something that everybody wanted to have when they came. And it wasn't just, it wasn't going to go to Atlanta. It wasn't going to go to New York. It wasn't going to go to just to Houston. He could go to all those, and it could compete with everybody on a world class oyster, but it could also be had by the guy at the beach,
Yeah.
drinking his favorite beer on the beach, and it was like, okay.
The PBR oyster.
Right. I always call it, grew up as a Busch Light guy, so, my Busch Light oyster. But, it's still an absolutely a world-class oyster.
Yeah.
But I didn't want a name that people were afraid of. And so, it's really allowed us, I think that branding, even though we haven't really done a lot of branding work, but that simple branding decision to do that has really opened up a lot of the local market at the beach. And that's something that so when COVID hit, a lot of, 50% COVID hits, 50% of all your big markets, cities are on lock.
Mm-hmm.
The other 50% are at 50% capacity?
Yeah.
So there goes 75% of the market overnight. Boop. So, and then we watched everyone run to retail. So when 90% of your competition runs to retail, it's like, man, wow, difficult. Well, the beach was a really good business. I had friends, I had connections, from growing up 6-8 miles from the beach, pivoted well and used some of those connections and some of those relationships to really build a relationship. And that's our goal. And that's something that Doug and I have done a really good job of and continue to put that in the forefront is we're not trying to sell oysters. We're selling a partnership with these restaurants and our distributors that they know that they can rely on us. We can rely on them and we work together. So,
well, and I think to your point, oysters are not a grain that you just have in the bin and somebody needs 10 pounds or 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds, you just go hit a button and pull it out.
No.
You got to plan for this stuff and know if they're not going to order every week X number of oysters, then how do you even manage that, right? Because if somebody just pops up and says, hey, I want 1,000 for this thing I'm doing this weekend, you know, that's kind of painful.
Well, they normally don't say, hey, I need 1,000 for this weekend. They normally say, hey, I need 1,000 for this weekend, and tomorrow's Saturday. And you're like, oh. So, you know, that's part of that education. That's one of the beauties of not having to do our retail as much in the beginning was we didn't have to educate every customer.
Yeah.
And off of that, though, we've been able to share because people come to the beach that aren't from the beach, and they have this great, amazing, world-class oyster. And they take it back and go, man, we had these amazing oysters. They're called Island Times or Grand Patures. And they take it back home. They go, well, how do I get these? And it's like, well, this is, you know, this. So that's kind of our path of spreading our own, you know, word out is one, there's a world-class oyster grown in Alabama. And two,
but you're in the tourist market where everybody kind of comes in and likes it and leaves.
And it is beautiful because there's a turnover. They go up north and they tell their friends and family, or even the locals, you know, get to the point they're like, where can I go get the best oyster? And a lot of times they don't tell them a restaurant anymore. They tell them, oh, go get Island Times. Well, where are they at? Well, I think you can get them here, here, and here. So now all of a sudden it's people aren't talking about the restaurant having the best oysters. They're talking about the oyster brand itself, which is beautiful, you know.
Well, that's what you want.
But we've built a relationship with the partners, with our customers, that they understand that it's important for their business because, you know, with COVID and then the travel restrictions and then supply chain issues that we've seen in the last, you know, 6-8 months to a year, you know, all of a sudden now people are talking to us because we're consistent, reliable.
Yeah. So switching gears here, Lew, what was your, like, growing up first oyster memory you ever had?
So oysters in Baldwin County, in Mobile in general, have been on the decline, the wild oyster population, but there's been there. It's kind of been a closed knit. So you were either in or you were out. You either knew them or you didn't. So we used to, when growing up, we would sneak down to an area called Three Rivers, which is on the Fort Morgan Peninsula in Navy Cove area. And we would sneak out there and take our toes and dig in the mud up these little creeks that kind of go up in on the marsh. And we'd find these, we call them cow tongues because they're about a mile long. Oh. But you can feel them with your toes. You reach down there and pick them out.
Right.
So, I mean, we used to jump off and do that for years as kids. And it was funny because that's what I thought an oyster was for years.
Oh, man.
I always thought that was an oyster. And certain times of year, they're great. Certain times of years, they're not. But, you know, it was a really neat product. It was cool. It's how I grew up. Bond Secure Fisheries was built on oysters dredged out of Mobile Bay.
How old were you when you were doing this?
Oh.
Like 12,
8,
13, 8?
9, you know what I mean? Somebody throw you off the boat and say, give me some oysters, you know. And then from there, you learn there's some, an oyster in Baldwin County has been not legal for years just because of reduced population. And then, of course, there was the cold winter days where you'd sneak down to the seawalls and prime off the seawalls in a 5-gallon bucket. Did that and everything back in my illicit days and had some good interactions with some Marine Resources, you know, officers that we're still good friends with today. Shout out to MRD. They know who I am. But, you know, and it's crazy. Going back to relationships, I still have a first name basis relationship with that officer that caught me when I was 15 with 2 buckets of oysters. You know what I mean? Wrote me a $500 ticket, you know, so I deserved it. I knew it was illegal.
Yeah.
He's actually now the NOAA representative for the entire Southeast, New Orleans district. So still getting to talk to him all the time. You know what I mean? So it's
and he's like, I'm paying attention to what you're doing, son.
No, we're past all that. You know, that was, but it's been a great relationship that we've had for years. And we talk about once a year.
When we had that guy at the chef camp dinner,
Scott
Bannon.
Yeah.
he had some good stories. He actually was on the podcast a couple episodes ago.
Oh, yeah.
And And I think I titled that one The Andy Griffith of the Waters, because he was literally telling me a story about a guy. And it was like, I said, that kind of reminds me of Otis, where it's like, oh, here he goes again. He's had to.
Well, it's a nature of fishermen, and that's one thing. This off-bottom industry was really built under the pretense of giving fishermen an opportunity to do something different. And there's a couple of issues with that. One of the biggest ones is fishermen themselves. Fishermen are independent people. Mm-hmm. They don't like being told what to do. That's why they work for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's not the legal side of it, but it's learning somebody else has done it before you. So, trying to reinvent the wheel and doing it your way is great to a point.
Right.
But really, you're probably tackling the same things that have been solved 20 years ago somewhere else. So, I think that's one of the things that I had to learn up in as I got older is, as part of being an engineer, I would say, is it allowed me to be flexible and learn that there's other ways. And, Google works.
Yeah.
Google's important.
Yeah, you can figure out a little bit of stuff like that. So from the cow tongue oyster, well, how would you eat that thing?
Man, you just
like a pack of saltines?
You kind of you ate it as you go. It may only be a couple inches wide, but 3 inches wide, but it'd be a foot long. So you of course catch them and they're kind of muddy. So then you put them in a sack and let them sit off the side of the boat for an hour to 6 hours. Let them kind of purge out. When you just kind of eat them as you go, as it goes down your throat. It's not a great experience unless that's what I thought an oyster was. But then from there, I got, as I traveled, I got to travel growing up some, quite a bit there for a little bit, doing commercial fishing. And of course, I've actually had real Apalachicola oysters. I know that most people say, oh, these are from Apalachicola. Newsflash, they're probably Texas oysters.
Right.
But that I got to travel around and have some of that, and then really got interested. I was doing a project with my best friend and another guy. He was doing some shrimp trawl stuff, some innovative stuff with it, and went to Homa for a shrimp symposium there, seafood symposium, which sounded really official. It was really just 3 people out there talking, but it was good. And I got to see a Sea Grant table where nobody was looking at it. It was just a guy from LSU, Sea Grant, sitting there at a table, lonely. And he had a bunch of oyster cages. And I was like, well, what's this? And he goes, oh, this is oyster stuff. And I went, oh, that's interesting. So then I bothered my best friend to death for probably 6 months. And Jarrett was not thrilled with me because he's like, look, we got plenty of things to do. We don't need to. I was like, oh, I want to do this. And da-da-da-da. So then I convinced him. It's my fault. And we got into it. We met Doug. And Doug was like, oh, these kids don't have it. They're not serious. So the Doug relationship and I kind of built over like 2 or 3 years of this. And I was working in a chemical plant up the road, and I had a rack on the back of my Honda CRV, and I'd like swing by and like throw 2 cages on it and take them back to Foley. It was way better than like making special trips. And you can pack exactly 68 oyster bags in a Honda CRV. That's exactly 68.
Like that's the shotgun
that's the
seat,
number.
everything.
Like I have tried every which way to pack more or less, and it's 68 as a number. So
do you have to run the air pretty cold, or were you using?
Oh no,
455?
those are clean bags. Those are clean.
Oh.
Those are what we actually grow in, so the bags fit the cages. But,
gotcha.
But no, the Honda's actually hauled more oysters than any vehicle I own. So there was a point where I was working at steel mill, and then left there and worked at another chemical plant to where I was going and waking up, hitting my alarm would go off at like 11:30. I would go down to the boat stay in the water, jump on the boat at midnight, go out to the oyster farm, pull oysters, bring them back into the cooler, and then go home. Next day, go out there, grab them out of the cooler, and that was approved cooler, and then run them to a distributor. And I was doing that all before work.
Oh, wow.
So there was a point where I was
like
getting
your little paper route.
but it was like
an oyster paper route.
Oh, it was awful though. I had a tarp that would like go up on each side of the Honda CRV. I mean, they were.
Does the Honda to this day? Does it have a little smell?
It has oyster mud on the roof, on the headliner.
Does it have a little whiff of smell to it?
Yeah, yeah, it probably does. I have an amazing fiance that puts up with a lot of stuff. which,
So you take her car.
yeah, we take her car a lot of places, so.
Oh, that's funny.
But no, it was a good time because we learned a lot about how to do things. At that point, every oyster farmer, most of them still to this day, they get out of their boat to pull their oysters.
Uh-huh.
That was a good learning experience because I said, the first thing to scale is to quit doing that.
Right.
So we kind of have perfected that for our farm. It's different for everybody else. We kind of came up with some different techniques and let us do that. We actually bought a boat from Canada that let us pull more efficiently.
Yeah.
And everything. But, our big one was we hired good people.
Right.
A lot of them are family. And even though that lends itself to some difficulties, we're loyal to them. They're loyal to us.
Yeah.
They understand that this is a process, that Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
And they see this as a career. And that was our big thing is I think a lot of other farms see people as laborers. They see them as digits. I need this many entities to pull this off, where we see it as people, and that, these people need a career. And if we're efficient at this, we can make a career for these people.
Right.
So, we have, we've got, I forget exactly how many, we got, not a dozen, but getting close to that, something like that, of people that this is their full-time job.
Wow.
They make, I'd say, a good living, and they do something fun, and they have all the fun.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Right.
The paperwork and the and making sure all the little idiosyncrasies and making
invoicing, chasing down collections, all sorts of,
and then all the paperwork for the health departments and this and that and national shellfish. That's the difficult part. And I mean, this is there for a reason. I literally went into probably the most regulated industry there is. Oysters are more regulated than the chemical plants I worked at. So
that's wow.
And that's been a huge, an eye opener is that, how do we make even the paperwork more efficient is a tough part.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say they're more regulated than the pharmaceutical industry, and I was going to.
Well, I wasn't going to drench into that.
I was going to laugh. So, what is, when you think about, like, okay, this whole thing I'm doing, what does success look like? Like,
probably anything in life, success is a moving target. Because if you get satisfied, which is literally success in a nutshell,
right?
You're probably done. This is an industry you're going to have to be hungry in. You have to want to do it. I think success for us is seeing that, we've generated something that will sustain itself for really our employees, us, for the city of Dauphin Island. It's been really big. I mean, Dauphin Island is getting behind this big time. They see this as, the next, something that separates them different.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Cedar Key. Cedar Key is, clams of Florida.
Right.
Who would have thought that there'd be Clamville of, Clamtown, USA would be in Florida, but it really is, and they've embraced it. I see that Dauphin Island will be, Oyster Town, USA in 20 years. And we now are on two of the restaurants on the island. They're big partners with us. They really enjoy the product. People love it. They talk about it. The chefs are passionate about it. I guess success for me would be one day being able to say, kind of out of engineering, and I can do this maybe along with something else, but make this more my primary, career, I guess. I enjoy the people. The people are a good time,
Yeah.
There's always some characters in the kitchen.
About you. I see that about you. Well, we're going to move into the lightning round with Lew Childre. So, Lew, these you can go as deep as you need to on these and explain yourself if you're wrong. Try to make me convinced that maybe you weren't wrong on this. But first question: biscuits or cornbread?
I'm a cornbread guy. I really am. But
is that just because your boys over at Bayou?
No, I mean, it helps. It does help. I'm a little shout out to Bayou Core Farm. Just saying, they got the best grits and cornmeal in town. But there's nothing like a biscuit in the morning. Now, anything but breakfast, I'm a cornbread guy. But definitely a biscuit in the morning.
I mean, you don't get like a sausage, egg, and cheese cornbread.
No.
Did you ever put an oyster on a biscuit?
Now, Definitely not.
I actually had some. It was oysters and gravy and biscuits.
Now, that would be pretty fire. That would be fire.
It was fantastic. All right. Favorite cut of steak?
Well, steak's kind of one of those weird things that, like, I've only really got to enjoy the last, probably 10 years of my life. Wasn't really like a financially viable option to enjoy steak. I do know how to cut pretty decent. Like, I mean, I can take like a New York loin and cut it pretty well.
Right.
A friend of mine's were butchers, so I'd get like all the scrap meat, but I don't know. I like a good, of course I'm like those people that I like a filet because it's about, I don't eat too much.
Right.
But I punt. I tell you that. I like it all. I'm a beef eater. I'm a meat eater.
I love all of those. And I used to always, when we were talking earlier about doing the food reviews, I would always go get a filet at all these different places. And part of my mindset in it was because you could compare apples to apples.
Right.
Like, I mean, their filet versus this filet versus that filet. And eventually I stopped butterflying them,
Right. God.
No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. I have actually butterflied fillets for other people eating at my house, some of whom probably listen to this podcast. Love y'all, but you'll eventually get there.
I'm one of those people that so we have I keep referring to my best friend, Jarrett Frith, and he lives next door to my grandmother, and we have a 20-foot greenhouse. We're about to build a 40. We have like a little aquaponics set up and growing some Swiss char and some kale and stuff like that. And so I went over to my shark fishing buddy's house, and we cooked some Swiss char, and he had some deer tenderloins. And I showed him, look, man, all you got to do is just sear those puppies real hot.
Slice it across the grain.
Slice them real thin across the grain to where, they're undercooked. And right before you get done, just throw them in there. Just enough. And he's like, oh, man, these are tender. Oh, these are awesome. I'm like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So no offense to my dad. Love you, Craig, but, you overcook everything. So I've had more hockey pucks of deer burger than you can shake a stick at. So,
well, it's in the wild. You got to cook it more.
Right. No, definitely not. Love you, Dad.
Yeah, we had that same. My mom was like, "Oh, son, you better get all the pink out of that.
You got to cook it to death. It's already dead."
So, speaking of cooking to death, what's your favorite barbecue? We got pulled pork butts, brisket.
No, I'm
ribs.
definitely. Let's just call it. I'm a rib guy. I mean, there's just.
Are you baby back or St. Louis?
I don't even know what that is. I just like good ribs. I mean, so my dad's buddy growing up, they spent a lot of time in Honduras. And in Honduras, there is no barbecue sauce. It just doesn't exist. So they have soy sauce, they have Worcestershire, and they have plenty of mustard. So their Honduran barbecue is half soy, half Worcestershire, and literally a container of mustard, and they mix it up and they just keep coating it as you cook it. Because it's not sticky, you have to coat it to death.
Yeah. They need some honey, brown sugar.
Well, but the good thing is and not hating on all that wonderful sweetness, but it's not sticky. Mm-hmm. And you can eat we call them beach ribs because you can literally eat them and the sand doesn't get on your hand when you get done. And I really like that. If you cook them right. But my engineer at work just cooked some fire ribs last week. Did a great job.
So when you're in Alabama, I know you're talking about your Honduran versions of all this, but when you're in Alabama, are you like a sauce mixed with, if you do pulled pork, do you mix your...
Oh, yeah, sauce with the meat.
Sauce with the meat?
Oh, yeah.
Are you a Alabama white sauce or do you go red? Or what?
I like I'm more like the thin red sauce. Not
the
super,
Hawaiian punch version?
Yeah, I love that. I'm even a guy that takes the bread and sops it up in it because it's good, You
got to get all the calories off the plate.
Oh, of course, I'm not a skinny man, and I'm proud of it.
You can't leave those calories behind just by themselves. So I'm assuming that you like a raw oyster.
Of course.
Outside of, on the half shell, what's your favorite oyster dish?
So I'm gonna do two. So we're gonna go uncooked first. So raw prepared. So I love a good mignonette, like a good red wine mignonette.
All right, so tell us your mignonette recipe. What do you put in there?
Actually, shout out to Hudson, the engineer again. He's actually making some. We're serving some at brewery over in Mobile.
Nice.
On Saturday afternoon during Mardi Gras. So of course, you got to do the shallots.
Right.
A little rice wine vinegar mixed with, like, do about 50-50 with a, he's going to do a white wine. So he did what's the fancy wine that's grown on the coast? It's the salty ones.
The Sauvignon Blanc.
Sauvignon Blanc, yeah. So Sauvignon Blanc there, shallots, of course, and then and I kind of got it's stored away somewhere.
A red pepper flake or something in there to give it
just
a little punch.
Bit.
Yeah.
And then, but the secret is letting it marinate. Don't make it and then decide to use it an hour later. It's not that good.
Yeah.
But if you let it sit for a day or two, really let some of that shallot flavor infuse, is it fine?
Yeah. Did you bring oysters with you?
I did not. I cheated. So we've been really, really busy.
I figured it probably wasn't on your way, but
it kind of was. He tried to convince me, y'all. He's like, maybe I can pawn him off on some oysters. I have to get him next time.
We'll be here. All right, so that's your first one.
Okay, so let's go prepared. So a friend of mine actually did this for the World Food Championships one time, and it is a volcano oyster. So imagine like a volcano roll.
All right, so like at the bonsai,
right? Wherever your local sushi place is,
right?
So pretty much it's just like that, except instead of crab meat, because of course crab's not that readily available or it's pretty expensive.
Right.
We actually peeled and pureed like 100 pounds of raw reds. So actually they were from Aquila. Shout out to Aquila Seafood. Love my boys down there in Montsecure.
You peeled 100
pounds and pureed them, and that was fire. So imagine you've got a wonderful oyster, a big lump of like volcano. It was just like a spicy aioli, mayonnaise topped with some cheese in there, and then this lump of pureed raw red, which is like, this is the lobster of the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the filet mignon of shrimps.
Oh, man, and it was awesome. It is awesome. And I mean, I watched people lick the shell for 30 minutes after they got done,
Oh, wow.
Like, do you have any more? I'm like, no, sir. Like, you sure I can't lick the bowl? No, you can't do that. So that's probably my favorite prepared by far.
There you go. So you're not big Rockefeller and like all those things.
I like to be able to taste the oyster. I think, and again, it depends on what oyster you give me. So,
I mean, one of them big cow tongues. That's the perfect. When they're that big, it's great to cook them down.
Right. The sad thing is when you cook an oyster and it's still, 6 inches by 6 inches after you've been cooking it for 30 minutes, you got a monster, and some people are, you see the street food, this Chinese street food oyster, and you're like, no, you can't cut an oyster into 10 pieces to try to eat it.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I thought you were going to take your cow tongues and slice them real thin, roll them into your sushi.
No. No.
Can you imagine? What's in your fridge right now?
Ooh, not a lot. So I'm a really busy guy. So my fridge at home is not a lot, I would say. Now, let's talk about freezer now. Freezer's fun. Freezer's fun.
Let's go freezer.
So I've probably got about 3 bags left of stone crabs. So Stiller, my shark fishing buddy, brought some up for me.
Mm-hmm.
So the big purchases of my life are truck parts. This is the last year. Truck parts, stone crab claws, and probably some raw red shrimp. Throw them in the freezer, and then an engagement ring. So that's like the big. That's not big purchases for the year. So I'm kind of punched out. So
there you go. We're gonna get to that engagement ring.
Oh boy.
In a minute here. So what's the best meal you've ever had?
Ooh. Best meal ever is definitely my mother's meals. So I'm saying that because I love her to death and she's awesome.
And she'll probably listen to the podcast.
Exactly. Now, the best restaurant meal I ever had. So there's a little place called Southwick Kitchen in Daphne.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah Matthews has excellent food. There's Hummingbird Way. I think Jim Smith does a great job. Great job. But probably the best was I went and visited my aunt in Houston. There's a chef there, Bobby Matos, he's part of, I think, the Ford Fry Group.
Yeah.
But he has a restaurant there called State of Grace. And he was a oyster customer and told him I was coming in town. We kind of worked out something fun. I kind of did like a spiel about why farm-raised oysters are good and kind of talked about the difference of shucking them to his staff. And kind of as a treat, he treated myself, my aunt, and my uncle to what I thought was just going to be like a dinner. And I was totally cool with it. I was like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. And he rolled out the red carpet. Like, I mean, the food was fire. Yeah. I'd hate to know how many of my own oysters I didn't have to pay for. But he had some marinated barbecued like U12 white shrimp that were awesome. It's just the whole meal itself was awesome. I can't remember like the individual pieces.
Yeah.
And it was like we talked about it just kept coming, and I was finally like, man, I'm growing by the instant, but it was worth it. So
yeah,
Bobby, I'm coming back to Houston in like a week and a half, just throwing it out there. So
hey,
I'd love to see you again.
So if you could have dinner with any three people, living or dead, throughout history, all of time, and you got a dinner party, and you're going to have, maybe you're taking them to Bobby's place. Who are you going to take with you? So I'm going to be really lame and say, so I never got to meet really either one of my grandfathers. Yeah.
Both were inventors. So on my dad's side, his father had a fishing tackle company. Literally went from like living under a bridge with his wife and his newborn to like the largest importer of cane poles in the United States in like 15 years. It was really crazy. Brilliant guy. Never got to meet him. He died in like 78. And so I was born in 88. So, and then my other grandfather, my mom's dad, he was really big. We're actually sitting by a smokeless fire pit.
Right.
He actually was like a huge in the incinerator business. He invented the smokeless incinerator. So some of the same technology, but both of them really smart guys that I never really got to meet.
Yeah.
I always thought that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Kind of figure out, history and that kind of thing of my family and how I kind of tie in. I'm one of those thinking minds.
Yeah.
And then if I was going to go something interesting, is of all the people in the world, I'd really like to think someone like Churchill, that he's sitting there and his entire country's like, they're getting bombed by the Germans every day. And he got voted out of politics.
Yeah.
And so he's out, comes back, is like the forefront of his country. He's the face. I just want to know, like, what was going through his mind? Like, how tough could it be? Like, I think about some of the difficulties on my shoulders and like, oh, how did you, but then like, man, how do you come back? Because he was kind of run out of politics in Britain and then came back as like, not only like the leader, but the figurehead of an entire country in its worst decade ever, So yeah. I think that'd be somebody kind of cool, or that, or like, maybe like major moguls, somebody like, Carnegie or somebody like that. Somebody
that'd be interesting too.
Built a monster from a molehill,
I'd love to smoke one of whatever Churchill was smoking on. Those
those stogies that look like monsters over there.
Apparently, he had a couple of those a day. I think that'd be fun to sit down around the fire pit with Churchill and see.
He looked like he ate good food too. He wasn't really a health nut, what I would say. So no. I think he ate pretty good.
That there's a TV show that really depicts him, and I maybe it was a movie called Churchill that came out a couple years ago. And it was the guy from, like, you remember Third Rock from the Sun?
Yeah,
the older guy?
Yeah.
And he, did the British accent and the kind of curmudgeon-y whatever. He, Churchill painted all these really, it was just a phenomenal story. So we'll let that one slide. That's pretty good. What's your favorite beverage? What's your favorite liquid pairing with a great meal like that? I know you said Bush earlier, but I mean, I'm not
a Bush guy. It's just what I can afford. Let's correct that.
So I'm buying. Anybody's buying.
If you're buying, probably whatever local. Kind of see to me, food is the flavor of life. So yeah, why not? The beverage of choice would be something that I'm a I'm the weak beer drinker. Let's be honest. Like we go somewhere to drink somewhere, I'm going to drink the lighter of the three.
Right.
I do like a stout, but I really got into sours. I'm not a beer guy, and all of a sudden I started. A friend of mine owns a brewery in Gulf Shores, and was like, "Hey, you should try this sour." And I'm like, "I don't drink sour." He's like, "No, you should." And I was like, "Okay." Loved it. Loved it. They've never made it since, and I'm so mad. It was the Boysenberry Warhead Sour, and I am so mad that Ryan has not brought that back.
He's going to have to get back on that horse and ride it.
I know.
All right, so you're engaged, and we talked about Kate briefly, but not in depth, and it was all good for those.
Yeah, I love her to death.
But so if you're arrested tonight, and I have to call Kate and tell her, "Hey, look, Lew needs some bail money," what does she automatically assume you did?
Ooh. Well, we're not on the water, so I'm probably good now. I probably got arrested helping somebody else. I'm not like one of those like super outlaws. I drive like a grandma. Like I mean, I've been fast, but I don't drive fast. Like she yells at me for doing 5 miles under the speed limit, along with everybody else. So definitely it would be something like, "Oh, you got into something trying to help somebody else, and you got arrested." Never been arrested. Been in a cop car a couple times. Never been arrested.
There you go.
So just want to throw that out there.
I don't think I have either. That yeah,
Officer Coggins.
I think they dropped the charges. Does that count?
Officer Coggins used to give us a ride home from the Alberta Social Club back in the day.
Really?
So, that's the only time I've been in the back of a cop car. So.
I was in a wreck in high school. This lady pulled out in front of me, and I slammed on the brakes on the Astro van, and they locked up, and we just sped up as we hit her. And so the cop's giving us a ride home, and he lets me sit up front, and I just, probably had a slight concussion. I was like, "Oh, this is fun. I've never ridden up front before." And he was like, "Oh, you've been in the back a lot?" And I was like, "No, I was just kidding. I have not."
Turned red. We're like, no.
But I don't think I've ever been in the back. It is fun if you're in the front and they cut the lights on and do stuff. It's like, okay, here we go.
I used to ride with a friend of mine that was in the Mobile Police Force a little bit. It was a good time.
So, all right, Lew, we're going to wrap up with 1 year from today. We're celebrating. We've got your big dinner. We've got you some of your sour beverage over there, and we're gonna essentially pop the champagne and celebrate. What are we celebrating that you're doing 1 year from today?
Ooh,
what have you accomplished?
Man, this is a tough one. Why are you gonna hey, man? You just went for broke on this one. I'd say still being in business. My God, like this world's ever changing. Like, the fact that we've been able to sustain some growth through all this craziness. Right. A lot of other people have fell by the wayside. We've been able to keep growing. I think that's a huge. I think every day's a little victory nowadays. I mean,
I'm not going to argue with that.
I don't think anybody's celebrating that they're conquering the world. I mean, maybe Elon or somebody like that or Bezos. But for us, it's really just that we're in business and that we've expanded our business profile and I tell you what would really be celebrating is get a little bit of me time back, a little of that work-life balance. It's more like work, and it's in life balance. But some of that would be good.
There you go.
That and the fact that Kate and I will be married.
Yeah.
So I'm 33, going on 34, and was kind of at that point where I was like, I could be unmarried the rest of my life. Met Kate, it's all good now because I'm getting married, and I think it'll be a fun adventure. So
there you go.
Ready for some youngins at some point.
I know. Well, you can't wait too long now.
I know it's getting old and dry.
That's great. Well, Lew, thanks for joining us on the podcast. It's been a real treat, and I appreciate you doing what you're doing and sharing your story about your endeavors down there in Lower Alabama.
Ready to get you on the farm,
Hey, look,
I want to see somebody all tough and brawny jump in there and flip over some oyster cages.
Man, I'm all about doing arms and shoulders.
Oh, arms and shoulders, yeah. So I think it'd be fun. We'll get you down there and play around a little bit and let you drive the boat, and look the part where we can get you some grudgeons and get them dirty for you. That way you look
some Cajun Reeboks.
Oh yeah, we got them. This factory installed.
I love it. I love it. All right, tell folks how to find you guys online. You got a website. You got a
So we hide in the space of the world. So if you really want to find us, the best way is, of course, Facebook.
all right.
But, what I would say is rather than finding us, find our partners. So, we're partners with some of the great restaurants. So both Islanders and Pirates on Dauphin Island. It's kind of our namesake. They're there on Dauphin Island. Go visit Dauphin Island.
Yep.
It's a great place, great people. Floribama, all the 3 Floribama restaurants.
Yep.
They're in the Orange Beach, Perdido Key area. They're all us. It's been a great partnership. Doc Seafood on the beach. Will, Jen, those are my people.
There you go.
I love them. And
all right. So if a chef is listening to this today and says, I want to learn more about those oysters or talk to you, do you have an email address or something you could share?
Sure. You can just hit me up at blindfaithseafood@gmail.com.
There you go.
I know that sounds kind of crazy. That's actually my old seafood business. So we got some fun stuff coming up the next year or two with it. But, right now, that's all hush-hush. But definitely, you can get in touch with me there. You can look us up on Facebook, Island Time Oysters, Grand Mature Oysters, and reach out there and get up with me. But and just be prepared because they're fine. If we do deliver, I know that's a crazy thing in more ways than one. So, that's not just the mail. We're one of those people that we want to deliver for the next year, 2 years, 10 years with you and build a partnership. So
there you go. Lew Childre, everybody, thanks for being on the podcast with us.
You've been listening to the Eat Y'all podcast, hosted by Eat Y'all founder and chief relationship officer, Andy Chapman. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you'd join us in our mission to save family farms by subscribing and leaving a review. Even better, share this episode and follow us on your favorite social media account at Let's Eat Y'all.